Hello and welcome to another edition of What I Wish I Knew Before I Taught a Particular Great Book. The great book we're dealing with today is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We don't know who the author of this tale was, but it is considered one of the classics of medieval literature. I think you'll agree. I don't think I have to persuade you too much to teach this particular book. The translation that we use is by J.R.R. Tolkien. So there's an appeal right there for most Christians. I think it's an excellent translation as well. One of the reasons I think that you should read Sir Gawain is that you should be familiar with this sort of romantic literature of the Middle Ages so that you can fully understand Don Quixote. Don Quixote is one of the greatest books ever written. It really invents the modern sense of humor, and it does that by making fun of these medieval romances. So you need to read The Song of Roland, you need to read Sir Gawain, you need to be familiar with this literature to understand then Don Quixote. And two, I think you need to read Sir Gawain because it heightens a conflict between the chivalric code and the rule of courtly love and the Bible, the basis for Christian ethics. So I think this is a significant book for Christians to wrestle with. So now we'll talk about what I wish I knew before I taught Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The number one thing is pretty straightforward. We don't know the author, but we do know that he is a contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer, the author of the Canterbury Tales. This means he lives in England in the 1300s. This is a fantastically written story. It's part of the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table mythos. So it's not in the particular collection of King Arthur and his knights. But here we find Gawain, one of the youngest and one of the least proven knights, accepting a challenge and then going on a quest. And I'm going to try to refrain from spoilers, but at the very least, you do need to know on this quest, he is getting ready to fight a supernatural knight, the Green Knight, and he has to seek him out and find him, and he's almost to where he needs to find him when he stumbles upon a castle surrounded by green in the middle of winter, and in this castle are a lord and his lady who are very hospitable to Sir Gawain. And the Lord proposes a trade-off that continues for several days that is kind of central to the story. The Lord says, you need to rest up before your big battle. I'm going to go out every day and go hunting, and I will give you what I kill hunting, and you need to give me what you get here in the castle. And unfortunately, what happens in the castle every day is that the Lord's wife, the lady, comes on to Sir Gawain, throws herself at him, and propositions him. And so every evening when the Lord gives his game to Sir Gawain gives him kisses, because he has received kisses from the lady of the castle. And oddly enough, the Lord doesn't catch on to what's going on. We get this sort of Joseph and Potiphar's wife tension, but Gawain is no Joseph, right? Joseph, when he is tempted by Potiphar's wife, flees temptation so quickly that he leaves his coat behind. Gawain knows that it's wrong to commit adultery, but also, by the code of chivalry, he should not offend his hostess. So he tries to live in this gray area where she's propositioning him, he doesn't hurt her feelings, but he also ultimately rejects her. And this is it's a good talking point for Christian students to talk about the idea of temptation and the necessity of fleeing temptation, you're a little, pardon the pun, tempted to think that Gawain does right, because he ultimately does decide, okay, I have to choose between the Ten Commandments and the chivalric code, and I choose not to commit adultery, which means that I am going to offend the lady of the castle, but there's nothing else that I can do. So you read that part and you think, okay, great. Gawain has passed this test and he's been very wise. I don't think from a biblical standpoint he has been wise. I think it was very foolish to stay around in the face of temptation for days and days, but we're supposed to laud Gawain for choosing the Bible here. Then things become more problematic. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a moment of cowardice for Gawain just before he goes to fight his final battle. And the problem with this cowardice is that it's ultimately because he doesn't trust God enough for the outcome of the battle. But unfortunately, Gawain decides that the problem with his cowardice is that he has let down knights and the chivalric code. He says this, "Through care for thy blow, cowardice brought me to consent to coveting, my true kind to forsake, which is free hand and faithful word that are fitting to knights." That's a little bit tricky to get, but what he's saying there is, I betrayed the chivalric code, I betrayed the brotherhood of knights when I chose cowardice instead of courage in confronting this supernatural competitor. And the plain fact is, the problem is not ultimately one of courage, the problem is ultimately one of faith. Gawain trusts in his own right hand and trusts in this magic talisman rather than trusting in God for the outcome of the battle. So as you can see, there's a lot to talk about in this particular book. I think Christians hear the word chivalry and we think chivalry's good. We should treat women with respect. We should look out for other people. We should demonstrate good manners. The problem, of course, is when you elevate a man-made code over God's particular law, right? And that's what's happening here, is this elevation of that code, both the chivalric code and the rules of courtly love, which are deeply problematic for Christians. I guess I should say this quickly. Everything that's wrong with Dante when he puts Beatrice on a pedestal and ignores his own wife is thanks to these rules of courtly love. And they encourage emotional adultery, they encourage neglect of wives, they encourage all kinds of problems. So Christians should have a lot of problems with both the rules of courtly love and the chivalric code. And a lot of that is going to come out in your discussion of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.